I'm Wayne Carey, and this is The Truth Hurts.
Well, hello again for another episode of The Truth Hurts. I'm Ayrton Woolley alongside Wayne Carey. Good to see you again, Duck.
Yes, very good to be here. Another long weekend, Ayrton, which I love.
What do you mean by
what I mean. Well, thanks to me, everyone got a long way. No, I've been getting a lot of text messages, a lot of people saying thank you for the holiday yesterday, but I had an interesting weekend because I got up to Sydney, and no, I didn't go up to watch the Saints and the Swans. I was on the plane heading up there, and people on the plane thought, oh, you're going to the AFL game. I actually went to the Rugby League on Saturday night.
That's a bit different.
Allianz Stadium. First time I'd been there to watch any football, let alone a rugby game. I think they play soccer there sometimes as well. But, you know what it highlighted to me? One, I love getting up to Sydney. The weather was beautiful up there, and you just you can hide away a little bit. And the other thing is just how much more skillful AFL is in rugby league.
Oh, you've gone there straight away.
So sorry to all the and remember, Wagga boy, I grew up playing league. You've got to be careful when you're in Sydney. You've got to say league, not rugby.
Yep, absolutely.
But in Wagga, we called league rugby. Just highlighted that and trying to explain the rules to a few people that were in the box that didn't know. Wendell Saylor, the great dual international superstar, he was in the box, a few of the GBS members. So it was a good, fun atmosphere, but trying to explain the rules to a few people that didn't know the rules to rugby, I said, you pretty much throw it backwards and run forwards. And that's about it. And then on the fifth tackle, you kick the ball forwards, all about gaining ground. You respect their toughness. That's one thing that's really evident. They hit hard, and their tackling is just exceptional. But there's elements to the game that I just find terribly easy, to be honest. And they don't, and the rugby fraternity don't like me saying that because it is disparaging, but they pretty much throw it backwards and run forward. So, but it was good. It was just a good atmosphere, something different to do on a weekend, and then got back to Melbourne yesterday to find out that we are actually we're actually quite our
profile is growing.
We're ruffling some feathers. Can you believe it?
Yes.
And I don't know too much about these two gentlemen other than one of them's dad is a legend, Jimmy Buckley, that played for the Blues back in the day. So when I was growing up, Carlton were they were a gun team, early 80s. Great players, obviously Jezelenko and big Mike Fitzpatrick in the ruck, and you had Jimmy Buckley, and just a great team. Bazusto and all of these players running around, and Jimmy was tough and relentless, and just everyone admired. In actual fact, I remember Anthony Rock talk because he was a Carlton supporter growing up. So when I got to North, his hero was Jimmy Buckley. So imagine how disappointed he is with his son Dylan, who didn't actually end up making it.
Oh, no way.
And now just
social media superstar.
The bird on the Bicky tin. But Jimmy would be disappointed, I reckon, in Dylan.
So for some context here, Dylan has his own podcast.
He does.
And he's made
I'd never heard it, but I heard that we got a mention on their podcast, which is great. But like I said, and then the other guy who
Daniel Gorringe.
Yeah, well, I didn't know his name, but he became famous, or I don't know, infamous, or whatever you want to call it, through Big Brother. I'm not sure whether he won it. I'm not sure how far he got, but he's become a social media man as well. But it's just great to get a mention from two guys that pretty much failed at what they have tried to do, but they are doing well with their podcast.
They are doing great. Very well,
and I'm glad that we made it onto their forum.
Yeah, hopefully.
It means it means they're listening. So thank you, boys, and Dylan. That was a little bit of tongue in cheek. I might have been a bit harsh there, but let's be honest, you never made it.
A bit of cross podcast promotion there. Onto the football, Duck. Yesterday, huge King's birthday clash, and I heard you alluding to King's birthday before for anyone who was just a little bit slow off the mark there.
Bit egotistical, that.
You've been waiting a long time for that to happen because it's been the Queen's birthday. Obviously, you've just been keen for the Queen to kick the can. So
no, well, when it happened, she helped me when it did happen. But anyway,
the Melbourne Collingwood game. What did we learn out of yesterday? Because the Pies have been going very well. Melbourne, we put a little bit of heat on last week as maybe not performing as they can, and then Melbourne come out and win that game.
Without stating the obvious, what it showed is that Collingwood are beatable, and it also highlighted that they've been vulnerable in a lot of games this year, even though they've got over the line. And Melbourne proved that. Melbourne should have won that game by a big margin. They kicked really poorly. And when I say kick poorly, you can have shots from difficult positions and miss, and you know that point tally piles up. You say, oh, they had heaps more shots, or there might have been a few rush behinds or whatever. But there was 3 or 4, especially in that third term.
About 5 minutes in a row.
Directly in front. And by the way, they weren't small misses either. A couple of them just snuck in from behind, and I think there might have been an out on the full. So, that was really, really poor kicking from Melbourne. As I said, should have won by a bigger margin. And what it also highlighted for me is that Collingwood's lack of a key forward. And when Mason Cox is on and he's actually marking the footy or really competing hard and bringing the ball to, he can be that player. I know McStay's been out. I've said this all along. I don't think McStay's going to be their saviour. He's not going to come in and grab a game by the scruff of the neck. He does compete well. He's always done that. He's a big body. But I think, Michaek being their number one forward, I think that's their missing link. For them to actually win the flag this year, it's going to have to be someone like, you can't rely on Michaek. He's not a big key forward. And I said this during the week. Yes, he's a very football smart. He's a worker. You'd want him. You actually want him in your team. But the reliance on him to do too much as a big forward is I think what might let the Pies down.
They played in the Melbourne's hands a little bit too with some of their forward entries. A few other moments in that game, players that I wanted to bring up with you. Christian Petrarca I thought was huge when Melbourne were really being tested earlier in the game when Collingwood were up by a few goals. I know he didn't win the medal. It was Jack Viney. I don't know if you saw post-game where it was Captain Courageous Jack Viney. Everyone's looking around. He hasn't been the captain.
Hasn't been the captain for a while.
Another one was Nick Daicos, who had a really intriguing game again. And don't want to be too harsh on a young player. He's played another great game. He stepped into not great. He's played another very good game.
Kicked the goal late in the game that gave them a chance.
So, but you've got some observations on him.
Oh, he still has little moments in the game where you go, could have he done that a little bit different? He's still a young player. In the heat of the battle, there were a couple of moments, but in big moments too, he does big things. So you give him a bit of leeway in some of those instances for the special things that he's capable of doing. He's a great player, and you're right about Petrarca. He in big moments now can grab a game by the scruff of the neck and he can take it away from you. Although he was one of the guys that missed, a really easy shot at goal that he should have kicked. So it just proves that Melbourne 100% can win the grand final. I think they have, and they've got players to come back in, as do Collingwood. So we might have watched a replay of the grand final on the King's birthday. I think, and I know Geelong have got improvement in them. Brisbane have proved again away from home, be beaten by Hawthorn. There's question marks over those interstate teams that struggle when they travel. And then, you look at those two teams on the MCG yesterday, you just wonder whether that might be the one.
Well, hold that thought, because a little bit later I'm going to ask you for your predictions for later in the season, and I'm going to hold you to these. We're going to revisit them again. We've done this a few times.
So we look like dingbats.
Yeah, exactly. I did find it funny, the discussion around, whether it was un-Collingwood like yesterday or anything like that. That to me was exactly a Collingwood game. They give you a chance every game. And
they do. But that's the way they play. They play high-risk footy. They take the game on. They're prepared to come back through the corridor all the time. Remembering they had arguably their best player for the year, Daicos, we know he's having a great year, but Degoe being out.
Exactly.
And them coming back through, so he was a big out for them.
You wouldn't be worried for a second if you're a Collingwood supporter.
No. And once again, even though Melbourne kept them in the game, they just give themselves a chance. And that's what you've got to admire about them. And even though yesterday wasn't high scoring, partly due to the misses, but it's an exciting game. Whenever Collingwood run out, if you're a Collingwood supporter, you'd be over the moon with the last couple of years. And the way McRae, I just love his positivity, the way he talks about his team. You talk about a team that gels and their synergy is just, they just all know they're predictable to one another. They know what one another is going to do. And then you look at other teams around the competition, and I guess the complete opposite of that
is Carlton.
And we don't like to keep going back to the Blues, but another disappointing loss, and another loss that just highlights the way they're playing. It's not effort. For Carlton supporters out there, and there's talk about Voss, and
so you think he's still got the players at the moment? It's not a matter of losing the players for him right now.
Well, I don't think that they're. When I watch them play, it's not them not being hard at the contest or doing what you'd want them to do. It's just that it's the lack of confidence. Therefore, the synergy, ball movement, that all comes into play. And that confidence not wanting to move the ball, like I assume they want to, because they want to get it in to those big forwards more quickly to give themselves more of a chance and be more predictable to one another, then that for me is what they're lacking at the moment. And when you hear supporters lean over the fence and verbally abuse their team, like I heard on the weekend, it must be very, very hard for, somebody, you can't obviously say it not even on a podcast, because it was, the language was just, terrible. And you do feel for the team when you're in that moment. And not that during my career, if we ever went through big form slumps. If we lost 2 in a row, Pago would take us on a bus and go and watch a movie or take us to the pub and say, have a couple of beers, because that was a form slump. Obviously Carlton are going through a little bit more at the moment, and their captain is coming under some sort of criticism, and I heard that, Vossi made comments about it on the weekend. It was only last week that they were saying Vossi might have missed because of an ankle, and now everyone's sort of on him about his form. He's not playing at his absolute best, but he hasn't been anywhere near Carlton's worst.
So the questions I have for you about Carlton, on Patrick Cripps, while we're on him, I mean, you would have had times, and I'm sure you've got a smart answer for this, but you would have had a couple of times in your career where you're maybe not playing as well as you would like, as a leader as well. That's setting the tone for other people. Voss, after the game, was asked whether it was injury related for Paddy, and he played that down. He sort of said, no, he's just got to work through his form. So how do you get yourself out of a slump?
I think the most important thing to do as the leader, and you learn this as you go, and it's one of the hardest things to learn, is when you're not playing your best footy, to remain upbeat. Your body language has got to show the rest of the team that you're not down, and you're trying to portray a confidence that you obviously don't have at that time. So that's the hardest thing, to try to trick others. And we spoke about masks and that fake bravado that you have. Well, that's where it comes to the fore. That's where you really, you walk around as if you are in control, even though inside you're saying, boy, I've got to lift. But just like, Vossi's advice to Paddy Cripps, and I'm sure Paddy's been around long enough now that it gets back to how you train. It's being able to get out on the training track and be upbeat and have a voice, and portray that confidence that, as I said, is really hard to when you're out of form. But for me, it was just the basics. It's not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, so on that system, Carlton, and some of these stats have been thrown around, and this is where I think statistics can be, I get a bit deceiving at times in terms of how they portray the game. Carlton plus 20 contested possessions does show an element of effort. 56 inside 50s to 41, so they had 15 more inside 50s than Essendon. But I felt as an observer from afar that where they were having their and also their goal kicking was poor. Shallow entries, wide entries. A lot of their shots from goal seem to be from a long way out or from angles. And the other one I found really interesting, the tackle count, another stat, of course, but tackle count they lost 64 to 33. They only had 7 tackles inside 50 to 19 to Essendon. I think that points to where they're getting the football and how they're so easy to rebound against. What of that does Michael Voss need to wear versus the playing group?
I think they would be training a different game style to what they're putting out on the track on game day. And that is, like, they don't want to be moving the ball the way they are. They don't want to be going to those areas. And I'm sure they want to get the ball inside 50 quicker and have better entries going inside. And then clearly that pressure coming out has got to, and that is based off, some of that is effort, but it's also system as well. So there's plenty to work on, but it comes back to what's on their shoulders. It's all in their head at the moment for the Blues. Now, how you get out of that is, like I said, just doing what you can on the training track, sticking together, and you're all in it together. As soon as you start to get little groups that go off together, and you start moaning and it's not my fault, it's their fault, or the coach hasn't been talking to me, or whatever it may be, you've just got to make sure that and this is where Paddy Cripps, once again, despite him not being at his absolute best, he has to make sure that those little spot fires don't start around the footy club, and that he's getting around to making sure that everyone is on the same page and working together to try to get out of it.
There's another couple of big tribunal cases this week involving James Sicily for his tackle on Hugh McCluggage, also Dan Butler for his tackle on Nick Blakey. It feels like we've overcorrected on. I get that we want to cut out concussion and we want to save the players from themselves, but there's a difference between a dangerous tackle with what it was known originally, which was the real sling motion,
double movement,
what we're seeing now, and they're two different cases. Obviously, what do you think? Firstly, about the one involving Dan Butler?
Terrible decision.
So he's come from behind.
Momentum. Players are now too. As you see, they're trying to stand up. I'm not saying Blakey was trying to stand up. He got surprised from behind, but you took him to the ground. That is just a tackle. There are going to be situations where a player is tackled and their head at times is going to hit the ground. But unless it's that slinging motion, and now even in the slinging motion, Sicily dived for that tackle. So he's dived. He's on the ground. And then he's used, but I couldn't have imagined that Sicily would think that he could sling or throw McCluggage onto the ground. Then you have the other kid, the young
Tyler Brockman,
Brockman coming through, so that then confuses the situation as well. But I know that's been sent straight to the tribunal. I think he's got a really good case, Sicily. I don't, and I know McCluggage goes off, and he's concussed, but accidents are going to happen. That's a really tricky one for me because he is on the ground. Sicily's on the ground.
And it wasn't a forceful sling in that scenario. I don't think either.
And so
there's a lot of grey area here. So Zac Merret as well was one.
Plenty of grey. Well, that's the other one. So Zac Merret, he's no case to answer. Yeah. Now, he's any different to Butler's for starters? I thought that was pretty similar in the way that was adjudicated, but so he's off. I mean, we do this every year when we're writing for The Age, and we're sitting there and we're going, this is the same topic that we talk about, and I agree, it's been a massive overreaction to these tackles, and now we're just seeing ones that are being put up for no good reason. But part of the disappointing about all of this, we had Sheed and West Coast last week talking about what had occurred in an incident with the goey, and I didn't like the fact that they were making comments about obviously an opposition player, and we've got the same thing that's happened this weekend where Zorko has now made comment on Sicily's tackle. I don't like it.
So he said he thought Sicily got it wrong.
Yeah, he got it wrong. And I just think, like, why you don't need to make, and the old player code, and and that probably went out with ABBA, but although ABBA's still in, they're still popular, aren't they?
Depends who you talk to.
No, but I think that you just don't need to make comments about something that's going to come under scrutiny, and Zorko's gone and done that. I don't like it.
Would you remember that if Dane Zorko said that about you or one of your teammates or Dom Sheed, you'd remember that the next time you played it, wouldn't you? You'd keep it in the back pocket.
Yeah, you would. Not that you can do anything these days. But I had a player for the Crows dob me in at the tribunal and say that he felt forced. By the way, I did the. He went to Richmond. Ended up captaining Richmond for a little bit from the Crows. What's his name? I can't even remember his name. But he actually at the tribunal.
I'm trying to. I know who you're talking about. Midfielder.
Kane.
Yeah. Yes.
What's his last name?
This is getting embarrassing.
No. Anyway, he actually went in there, and it was in the play, and he actually said they said to him, "What was the force like?" And he said, "Oh, very forceful." And I thought, "Oh, that's against the." It's against the code.
Kane Johnson.
That's it. Sorry.
I can't believe.
Sorry,
it's taken me a while.
Kane Johnson. But yeah, so I got 3 weeks or 2 or 3 weeks.
So when was that?
And deserving.
You got done a few times, did you? How many times did you get done?
What do you mean done? I got
suspended.
I got reported 13 times.
13 times?
Yeah.
And how many of those did you get suspended?
Less than half, I reckon.
Early days, you were pretty fiery, weren't you?
No, I 1 year, 94, I got reported four or five times in the 1 year.
I always just remember that because of the little flowing sort of almost permed mullet sort of thing you had going on at the back of your head.
But see, the game was different. I'm not, some of those things I'm not, and don't condone any of them because I'm not. The game was different back then. Not that some of the things that I did were acceptable even back then. There was the Satori one that I got weeks for was just letting him know that I didn't want him to stand in the hole in front of me.
Was that was the forearm to the back of the head? Was it? Was that the?
No. It's not worth talking about. But I got my right whack. I got suspended for it, and so I should have. And then the Kane Johnson one was only 2 weeks or a few weeks after. Then I got reported for Ben Hart 2 weeks after I got back from my suspension. So I missed another 2 weeks.
What did Pago say to you? What did he say to you after the second one?
The second one, I've got. Why have you got it there?
No, I don't.
What did he say?
No.
Well, he wouldn't have been happy.
Yeah.
These days the coaches are a little bit, but no, he would have let me know in no uncertain terms.
Now, speaking of the Tigers, really intriguing scenario now with what happens given Damon Hardwick stepped away so early in the season. It gives Andrew McQualter a really good run at coaching that footy side. And perhaps not someone we might have thought as a senior coach potentially. There has been some discussion, I see, whether he's maybe strengthening his case as an interim coach to be the full-time coach. We've seen that happen in the past with David Teague and Reece Shaw. Where do you sit on that sort of... I mean, it's very early days for McQualter, obviously, but where do you sit on those sorts of scenarios where an interim coach has a team playing well?
We just leave it... You've got to leave it right till the end of the year. You don't go making any decisions right now about McQualter. I think the team hasn't missed a beat, really. They've won 2 close games. If they go the other way, then we're not having this discussion. But he clearly knows the system. They clearly like him. I've heard Trent Cotchin talk highly about him, even though Trent probably not going to be there next year. You'd expect him to retire. But you just be patient. It's like these extensions. As soon as a coach has a little period where they win a few games, everyone wants to extend. Just like when they have a little bad patch, everyone wants to sack. You have a contract for a period of time for a reason. So if it's a long-term one at the start, let it play out. Unless they're horrific, unless they're really the performances just show that there's a real lack of confidence and you have lost the players, and that's evident that you've lost the players, and those conversations are had. Then I think you just leave it to the end. How many coaches have been pinched?
Yeah, it doesn't
from
happen.
Another club.
Doesn't happen often.
It just doesn't happen. So
there would be an argument around providing stability for the group and that sort of thing, knowing that the coach is going to be there for a period of time.
Yeah, and I agree, and so I agree with that. But if you've got a period, it's a bit like the Ken Hinkley scenario right now.
What happens now with Ken? You wait till the end of the year and see.
I still think you wait until. What are we now? So we're middle of the way through June. So you'd wait until August. I think they said August. So you've got another month of footy, and why do you have to re-sign before the next month?
What would
Just
need
wait
to happen
the month.
for Port Adelaide to? This is a question without notice. For Port Adelaide to re-sign Ken, is it a prelim? Is it a premiership, or is it just that they're playing decent football and get to a certain point?
Well, I think what Ken Hinkley has proven that he's a very good coach. So he hasn't won the magical flag, but he's given them a chance. They had an off year last year, a bit like Richmond, how many years ago now, and then they went on their run. They've got some unbelievable talent. We know that, especially through the middle of the ground, and Butters and Rosie and these guys, and obviously Horn Francis in the middle of the ground now. It's just it's a great combination, and I think Ken Hinkley is the man. And you mentioned it before. It's whether the players still love the coach and whether they want to play for him and they believe, and the voice isn't getting old. I think the turnover of that squad, because of all these young kids coming through, and Ken being a part of that, I guess bringing them through and being a part of recruiting these young kids that I just spoke about, who are now coming into their prime of their footy careers. Why would you want to get rid of Ken Hinkley? I think he stays on and he'll get an extension, but I don't think they need to do that until August.
Now, speaking of August and then September, Wayne, who are going to be our 2 grand finalists now? You've seen enough footy to get a decent sample size. I know there's a lot of footy to still be played as we get into the run home, but who are going to be the 2 grand finalists firstly? Well,
I said it before. I think Melbourne and Collingwood are my favourites to play off in the grand final. I thought yesterday was I thought it showed the whole footy world that these two are definitely the real deal. Both have got some really good players to come back into their team, so they only will be strengthened. And I think they're the 2 favourites to go through. Wouldn't that be a grand final?
Be a great grand final. It is interesting looking at the ladder when you think about who the challengers are, because you've got Port Adelaide in second, Brisbane fourth, St Kilda, Essendon, Adelaide and the Bulldogs. There's still some question marks over those interstate sides. St Kilda and Essendon, you feel like are being propped up by some easier draws. The Western Bulldogs, I thought maybe had turned the corner, and then they're perhaps a little disappointing against Port Adelaide. Who are the challengers? I mean, Port are up.
Well, Port Adelaide are the other ones, and Port Adelaide have proven that they can play away as well. And Geelong are the smoky, I think.
So they're in 9th currently.
But Brisbane have proven once again, and you can't gloss over this anymore. And Fagan can't. And I think he might have said on the weekend, he got asked a question. He just said, "Well, I don't know." He said, how do we? He just said, "I don't."
In terms
know.
Of how
do they fix their woes at the MCG?
Yep.
So if they get a double chance at the Gabba, and they, then obviously that sort of might book them straight through to a grand final. So they could be the one, and then who knows what can happen on grand final day. But right now, to be beaten by Hawthorn, that's and nothing against Hawthorn, by the way. They're what a great job Sam Mitchell, and that's what we were talking about before. Everyone's saying re-sign him now and give him an extension. He's not going anywhere, so why give him an extension right now? Just let him do what he's doing.
Brownlow medal. Now, I'm looking at the market here. This is on Sportsbet. Nick Daicos, $2.75, very short. Zach Butters, 5-1. Christian Petrarca, 6-1. Tim Taranto, $9. Bontempelli, $10. Dawson, $12. Oliver Neal, Andrew Brayshaw, Sarong, Rosie, and the list goes on. You haven't been as sold in Nick Daicos. You probably think there's been a lot of hype around him. He probably will poll well. Who do you think has been the best player in the competition to this point in the year?
Probably I think Petrarca. I really like the way he's grabbed games by the scruff of the neck. Butters has been unbelievable for Port Adelaide. I think Rosie will take some votes off him though. But Oliver and Petrarca both. I think they polled the same amount of votes last year. They were both high,
about 20. Weren't they?
Yeah. So I don't know. I look for players that are now proven vote getters, and I think Petrarca is one of those, as is Oliver. So does Butters poll well? Will he poll, in what has been his breakout season in terms of consistency? So that's the question mark over him. And then you just keep looking down the line at all the midfielders. Obviously, Daicos, off a halfback flank. Let's not forget, there's been some, guys that have, Gavin Wanganeen won one from a back pocket. So, and he clearly stands out and he gets a lot of the footy. So, Daicos is a massive chance. But I would have thought someone that's more permanently in the midfield might, because some of Daicos's possessions, let's not forget it, from kickouts.
Yes.
So when you look at these numbers, they are skewed by that as well.
Yeah, still in terms of those other names, still think the Bont's got to be right up there. It's it's an interesting discussion, isn't it? Because who is the best player in the competition is not always matched by who is the Brownlow medalist. The other one I find really intriguing is Jordan Dawson. He's at 12-1 because I'm not sure that, Adelaide have won quite a few games now. I'm not sure there's a whole lot of guys taking votes off him. Could be the kind of player that sneaks under the radar a little bit more. The Rising Star is the other one, and this involves your football club in a way, given that North Melbourne has Harry Sheasel. So he's just been overtaken in terms of the favouritism for the Rising Star by Will Ashcroft from the Brisbane Lions. Who do you see as winning the Rising Star this year?
I think you throw a blanket over all of those guys. I think it's a really good race this year, isn't it? And then you've got Wardlaw that's of recent times,
coming with
the
a rush,
few weeks, he's coming with a rush. If he's just good to watch. What's exciting about our competition, and you only have to, the start of this year, you looked at all these draft picks and you go, oh, well, everyone was excited about it. But these kids are, just like Daicos did last year, these kids are dominating the competition already. It tells you how the competition has changed because, kids can come in and do that. But all of those guys would be worthy winners.
There's a name I want you to focus on for the next few weeks. You being a forward, you would be right all over this guy. He was pointed out to me by a St Kilda supporter early in the year. I didn't know a whole lot about him. Mitch Owens, his name is. He's currently third. I might have made a little investment when he was a little longer in the betting. I reckon he's right in the hunt, and he's doing as a young key forward what he's not getting the accolades, but he's a worker, and he's kicking goals. He's backing up in the ruck. He's really high up in terms of contested possession. So I want you in the next month.
Yeah, I'll watch him. But remember, it's a panel that votes on this as well, isn't it?
Yeah. So you're going to sway their votes for me by the end of the
year.
Well,
the panel, they're seduced. A lot of the panel members are seduced by numbers, and
they'll be listening.
Yeah.
They'll be listening.
I think you'll find the winner will come out of the two that you mentioned.
It probably will. Now, we do go global from time to time on the Truth Hurts. I did see with interest Kanye West had his birthday on the weekend. I think he was 46 or something like that. You were 52, I believe. Maybe it was a week or so ago now. He
53 years.
You're
52, mate.
Oh, jeez. I was going to say. I noticed there was some interesting parts to his birthday party. Sushi was being served on naked women who were being used as the plates. Perhaps not, acceptable in an Australian context. Who knows? But have you ever been to any extravagant events?
Isn't it amazing what musicians and rock stars can get away with in comparison to sports stars? If you're a sports star and you had a party like that, you would be. It would just be. You're a disgrace. Fancy doing that. But if you're a rock star or a musician, it's acceptable to do all of those things.
You've been pretty tightly held on your own birthday stories there.
But I'm not a birthday person. When you hit your 50s, you tend to go backwards. And the way I look at birthdays is it's not how old you are; it's how old you act. So I'm 22.
That's maybe being generous. Also, in an international sporting sense, Novak Djokovic won the French Open. We're going to some different territory here, but it got me thinking about the GOAT debate, the greatest of all time, and how we judge these different things, because there's that discussion with him, with Rafa and Roger, and you see it in the basketball context with Michael Jordan and LeBron James.
We got Messi and Ronaldo, and you got all the sports all around the world that Wayne Gretzky and whoever else.
That's a good one. Just with Novak, he's up to 23 Grand Slams. Rafa 22, Roger 20. I don't know if it's the way people played, if it's the dominance, if it's statistically. How do you judge And how are you judge now Novak versus those other two guys?
Well, I had this conversation with, I believe, the best sports analyst this country has ever seen about a year or two ago, 2 years, maybe 2 years ago now. And that's the great Bruce McAvaney. And Bruce, the way he explained it, was compelling because I just sat there and not too many people, you sit there and hang off every word, and he goes through their statistics and how they've won. And he believed at the end of the careers, Novak would be the best of all time. So now he's won the most Grand Slams. I still find it hard to compare eras because of even sheer racket size, like how the rackets have changed, technology has changed, and obviously, even the technology with being, the ball being in or out, like how many balls were called out or in back in the day. So there's all these little changes to the game and how it's evolved. But I think, I would have loved to have seen, Federer play Sampras at the peak of their powers, because I think Pete Sampras was the best that I saw when I was coming up. And then I think Federer's been the most gifted out of all the players. Nadal, for me, because it's all so lopsided with all the French Opens.
Yes,
I don't think I put him in the same as Federer and the Joker. It's a great debate, the Jordan, James debate. People that follow basketball more than me say the Jordan Defensive Player of the Year, and obviously the three-peat twice, and never lost a finals.
Yes,
and all of those different things. LeBron's probably, chased a few titles, so gone to franchise teams to get them. Yes, he's helped them get them because he's an absolute star. But the Messi, Ronaldo, and these sorts of names, Maradona. Where does it stop? It's
Matthews.
It's great.
Matthews,
it's great debate.
Carey.
No, Matthews is the greatest VFL player of all time.
You said that. You used that a couple of weeks ago. You've used that before, haven't you?
Well, Lethal is VFL.
Yeah.
That's what Lethal play.
Yes. No, I'm picking up what you're putting down. Well, Wayne, thanks again for your time and your insights on the Truth Hurts. Another big guest coming our way later this week. We'll keep that under our hat for now, but stay listening, Spotify. And
the giant of the game.
Yes, someone that you've had some great battles with over time. So look forward to that, and we'll see you again next week.